Do you want me to start? Okay. Well, I think one of the reasons why I got hired is I was not a metabolomics researcher before I got to my position, and I got hired because I had the ability to communicate the research, communicate the science quite well. So I think they saw that I was good with people and I could work in a team. And I could learn really fast. I think that was one of the things that I was able to demonstrate, that I could pick up information very rapidly and use it well. So that helped me in the position I have right now.
Skills and talents, is that what the question was? I guess, it's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that since before, but I mean, as a faculty member, especially when you're starting out, organization is critical. The ability, be a great communicator, because you have to work with students and a number of other, I guess, I hate to say stakeholders, it sounds so busy, but students and parents and the administration. And so I think having those good communication skills, and also the ability to work fairly autonomously, because there's no real job manual, there's no job description per se. I wasn't handed anything when I started, it's just like, go be a professor. So I think a willingness to to understand it's a very autonomous, independent sort of trajectory. There's some mentoring that happens, but I'm not sure that's a skill set, but that ability to do that, to work independently, and a great deal of patience with yourself and with those around you.
All right. So on my end, I would say first and foremost, I was trained as a bench scientist, and that's what I still do. So really, an understanding of molecular biology is, something that I bring to work every day. And I think what goes along with that is also just problem-solving skills. So, something that, right, as I was doing my PhD, lots of problems and lots of, kind of troubleshooting. And that's, again, essentially what I do, is, come into work every day with a problem that we're working to address. How can we optimize this workflow? Why is this particular enzyme not doing what we think it should be doing? So on the kind of not bench side, certainly communication skills, as I mentioned, we regularly talk to customers, go to scientific meetings, give presentations, so that's certainly important. And also writing. So we, for instance, write all of the manuals that you guys hopefully follow and think are well written and clear. So I think that's kind of lots of different skill sets that come together to be a development scientist.
I'm just going to echo that communication is huge. And especially since joining the federal government, which is about as big as an organizational entity as you can join, everything's teamwork. The scale of the projects that we're working on, it's impossible for one person to do it by themselves. And so everything is teamwork. And so you have to be able to communicate to make progress on projects. Something else that's been really important for me is always learn new skill sets and always be open to learning new things. Before starting this job, I did not have any agricultural, horticultural, quite frankly, applied science, plant sciences background. And so coming into this job, I was very much learning the farm scale operation side of plant growing. And actually that's been an incredible amount of fun to get my hands dirty outside. So always be learning.
Okay, so for me, I would say a large portion of my job is editing. So definitely written communication skills, extreme attention to detail, being the kind of person who can notice whether there's 2 spaces after a period instead of 1, if a DNA strand in a piece of artwork is twisted the wrong direction, stuff like that is really, really important for this job. And then sort of the creativity and flexibility to be able to just jump in and do whatever somebody is asking for. So if somebody is sending me a white paper about flow cytometry that needs to be edited, I don't know anything about flow cytometry. You can't do flow cytometry on plants. So just being able to do the background research, to say, okay, I'm going to figure this out, and we're going to make something that is really great, and just taking the leap, I would say, is really critical.
I'll open the floor. Do you all have any questions? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Kyle. Yeah.
People management, especially I feel like getting my career started in academia, they're like, okay, you can go to like a workshop maybe once every 3 years about how to work as part of a team, but I didn't receive zero formal training in how to actually manage a team. And so that's been a pretty steep learning curve, and I've been really fortunate to have a good team to work with. So they've been sort of helping me through learning that process, but definitely the managerial side of managing a team.
So, prior to starting at NEB, I'd only ever worked on plants. Certainly I had the kind of molecular biology experience, but just, getting an understanding of, human disease, cancer, how that applies to, what people in those fields are interested in when it comes to doing next generation sequencing. So it was, it's always been helpful, right? We go to a fair number of conferences as development scientists, and just to see what, people in the field are doing and talking to people and meeting with customers, has been really helpful to kind of expand that. And I have a kind of a broader appreciation for kind of the diversity of biology across, plants, animals, than I did before.
Thank you. Teaching. I think that most of us know how to do our research. After you get your PhD and a postdoc, you know how to set up a lab. You can envision how to set up a lab, order materials, supplies, get equipment. But when you walk in, and none of us, oddly enough, enter the academy having any kind of real training in teaching. And so you're going to be faced with walking into a classroom and how do you develop a syllabus? How do you design lectures that, and classroom active learning experiences? All those things you kind of on-the-job training, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. So that was probably something the skill I didn't have that I had to develop. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge, I think in the beginning, especially the place like at Colgate where I work where teaching is so important. I think that's probably one of the skill sets I wish I would have had more training on. And I really came to light. I had a postdoc in my lab who spent 6 years as a special education teacher in the public schools. And I was shocked every time I said, I just read this article on this new technique. She said, we've been doing that for years. It's like, well, these teachers, they really are trained, and I was not. So I think that's how I'd respond to that.
Well, a couple things come to mind. When I started at the Broad, I was primarily a wet lab scientist. I did a lot of cloning, protein expression, gels, you name it. I was doing that. And there was nothing like that at the new group where I was working at. So I had to learn computational tools, programming, R, Python, never touched them before. So I would say within the first year of joining this group, I learned more than I'd learned like the previous 5. And a lot of it, there's no one teaching you. No one's gonna sit down and say, here's how you program. So a lot of it had to find tools online, like there was Coursera and all these things. But the good thing is that I had problems to tackle with what I needed. So it made the learning process a bit more exciting in a way. I second people management, and the other thing that I had to learn, or I'm still learning, is sort of finance and return of investment on projects. Like you don't have unlimited time in life to work on everything. So you have to figure out what projects are good return on investment. Sometimes they're boring, but you need to think about, the group and how it is funded, and sort of put time into projects that are really exciting, but maybe very risky based on like what you're interested in. Learning that balance is not trivial.
I don't know.
For me, I would say marketing has been a huge piece because I had no marketing background before I came to Bio-Rad, and then also working on video. We do quite a few videos and script development, and I had never thought about how to do any of that before, but had to learn all of it on the job. And then definitely people management, I would say I feel like maybe that's something that we should be incorporating into our graduate training programs, because it seems like that's a common theme, but for sure has been something to learn along the way.
George, I thought I saw your hand up. If you had a question. Yeah.
Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in graduate school?
Ooh, that's a hard question.
Prepare for your future career. Become a lawyer.
I think for me, I would have started preparing for more of a science communication career earlier. I figured out pretty late in the PhD program that I didn't want to be a research scientist for the rest of my life. And the process of even science communication, there's a million different career paths. So the process of figuring out even which one of those I was interested in was a lot to fit in while I was trying to do like the last 2 years of my PhD. Yeah, that's what I would say, is doing more career development stuff earlier.
I spent a lot of time in grad school mastering either wet bench techniques or specific types of data analysis pipelines that are no longer used. So I think this gets back to an earlier point about, yes, learning those skill sets was super important for grad school, but it's really about being able to learn the skill set rather than the skill set itself that I was learning. So always be able to learn new skill sets.
So I think, and it can be, I think, challenging in the, course of a PhD to find time to do some sort of, internship. But I think, right, the first day that I walked into NEB was the first day that I'd ever been in an industry kind of environment. So there's obviously, things you learn about how industry works. I did have a chance to, through some, people at Cornell and also, alums of BTI, talk to people who had gone on to industry careers. So I had, I think, a decent understanding of what to expect. But I think, any opportunity for kind of a real world type experience, is helpful just to understand, what this kind of environment's like. Thankfully, I enjoy, what I'm doing and I enjoy being in industry. But, it's always good to have some idea beforehand, I think.
I've never thought about that question before. I'm sitting here like, what would I have done differently? Probably taken more time for myself and my family. I think that was something, it's easy to get in the rat race of and forget about yourself. And I think that's probably something I would have done differently now in hindsight. And I would definitely have had more time management skills. The time management was something I didn't have then. I wish I would have had that. Maybe I would have taken a class in time management. I don't know but I, probably just stepping back from and having a more realistic approach of what I was doing and, the need to balance that with, with life. I think that was probably something I wasn't very good at the time. Not sure that's a good response.
I hated writing, so I avoided it, and I avoided looking into how a grant was put together or how to manage it once you got it, and how you could plan for, we can expand the lab, we can hire people now. Like I avoided that, and I think it would have been really useful to understand that now, and it's something that I completely avoided. So if I could do something differently, I would have tried to find ways to kind of push myself more to develop that skill.
Awesome. So I guess along those lines, I feel like some common themes that we're hearing are skills needed in communication, people management, maintaining the drive, or just wanting to, or being open to still learning. Are there any investments or practices that you have made, or habits that you have that kind of, I would say, enhance or kind of keep you able or allowing you to communicate? I don't know where I'm going with this, but I hope you are.
Sure. Luckily, I am in an institution that has many resources. So the professional development that we get is always there. Like everyone mentioned managing skills, people skills. I've been through like probably 4 management programs in the institute. And a lot of them are very hands-on, like what issues are you having with people? And they're like case studies. So you come in and then you share ideas with other people. So you're constantly learning. So I haven't had to pay anything for any of these things. The institution is doing it because the institute benefits from that. And other things are professional development. We have to kind of catch up with the technology. It's fast, quickly moving. And again, I get sent to meetings all the time, sometimes to survey different fields to figure out how people are using MassPick in different settings. So it's really refreshing coming here and learning like, oh, people are using MassPick to identify structures of different plant hormones and things like that. So those are, I think, the two pillars, the career development, professional development that we have, like institute activities as well as scientific community developmental activities.
That's a good question. I think, I mean, what I do now is I start my day with, I guess maybe I'm old school, but I have a yellow steno pad, and I make a list every day of what I have to do. First thing, I sit down in my office, I don't open my computer, I have my list from yesterday, and sometimes it's a whole page, and I rewrite it every single day, and I check off the things that I've done the day before, because, I have, especially when I was an administrator, I had my administrative staff to manage, I had my lab to manage, I had my classrooms to manage, and it's very easy to get those things just disappear. And so, if it's not on the first page of my email screen, it doesn't exist. And so if I don't get to it, I don't have time to go back. And so I make a list every morning, and I take the time, 30 minutes maybe, to really rewrite that list, and that solidifies in my brain sort of what I have to do for that day. Was that you're asking about?
Absolutely, yes, thank you.
No, I forgot the question, so I should have written it down.
I don't know if I formed one.
No, but professional development is critical. I mean, I think, I ran a faculty development program, and that was just going off of that, so critical, because there are so many opportunities out there, whatever it may be, that, for teaching and research that exist that you can, take, and a lot of times the universities will pay for those programs, and, because it's a great investment, especially if you can bring stuff back to the home institution, so.
I try to say yes to as many things as I can. So it's just always, I think, being open to, different opportunities and getting a chance to, to go to a conference or, for instance, if someone asks, oh, you're going to be here in San Diego for this conference, do you want to go on a few customer visits with the account manager that's out there? Right? No one is saying, yes, you have to, but I always enjoy, going out for those visits. If there's an offer to give a talk somewhere, give a poster, I try to say yes, as much as I can. And I think that just, keeps me just learning new things and getting new experiences and meeting new people, which I think is super valuable.
So I'm going to address the specific arena of people management. One thing that I think has really helped me is cultivating a empathy mindset. It sounds very buzzwordy, but I just came up with it. I don't think it's a thing. But this is like a balance I'm still trying to figure out of being like knowing what's going on with the people on my team, what's going on with their lives, but also respecting privacy, right? And so, so it's like, it's like we're all very busy people. I don't have time to chit chat, small talk every day with everyone on my team, but actually that small talk can be really important because then you learn about what is going on in people's lives. And so, if someone's really struggling during one week, well, you might have a starting point for understanding why that's happening and how to help them to get past whatever is happening. And so that, they can continue contributing to a team and to a project in a productive way. And I guess along with that too is being like a gratefulness mindset too. And so I think that really helps when you're having conversations with team members is to always open up with, hey, I see that work that you're doing and I really appreciate that you're approaching it that way. I think that's great. And then you can move on to the rest of the conversation, compliment sandwich. But yeah, so I guess just it can be a lot of time, but I think it's a good time investment to actually have good person-to-person interactions with your team members.
I think maybe I'll build on that a little bit by saying also kind of staying humble and not being afraid to ask for help and to ask questions even of people who are even of people who are on my team, who I'm technically their manager. I email my team all the time to say, hey, I encountered this thing. How would you handle this? Does anybody know whether we have a precedent for how we would handle something like this? everyone around you is a really valuable resource, and they don't stop being a valuable resource ever.
That's actually, it reminded me of a really great point. So when I started my job, I inherited a project and a team that included 3 people who've been doing their jobs for 25 plus years. They are amazing resources. I mean, yeah, on paper, I'm their supervisor and I'm supposed to be telling them what to do, but I have been learning so much from them. So yeah, again, everyone is a resource.
Mentioned attention to detail, 1 space after, 2 spaces after a period. What do you see in experienced professionals that seem to be the same errors over and over and over and over again, that actually leads to a lot of downtime, a lot of frustration, a lot of, rework, that if they understood what it is they're trying to communicate, everybody would be happier. What are those kind of parameters?
Okay, that's a good question. So I think the big one I see is inconsistency. So you can see this in almost any PowerPoint talk that you see anywhere, that some people will have, some of the slide titles will be in title case and some of them will be in sentence case. And some slides have bullet points and some of them just have sentences. And sometimes the bullet points have periods at the end, and sometimes they don't. And it really makes your talk or whatever it is you're working on look a lot more professional if you pay attention to keeping that consistency throughout the whole piece of material. And then I think the other thing is remembering that whoever you're talking to does not know what you know. So I think a lot of people, it makes sense to them, but when you're reading it fresh, it doesn't, not everything comes across. So trying to read it with a fresh eye and getting somebody else to read it who isn't familiar with the subject can really help a lot.
Hi, what was your relationship with the literature in grad school, and how has it changed now that you are professionals? And like realistically, what is your advice on the literature?
Okay, I guess I'll start. I don't delve into the literature a whole lot anymore. I'm doing a lot of surface level sort of skimming to make sure that I'm understanding something or getting an answer to a very specific question. So I don't have like journal subscriptions or access. The only things I can read generally are open access. So that's changed a lot for me, but I don't use literature a lot anymore.
In undergrad and grad school, I just recall a lot of courses that had paper discussion components to them. So everyone reads the same paper, whole paper discusses it. I'm kind of ashamed to admit I don't necessarily read a whole paper all the way through very frequently anymore, which is a shame. But yeah, the Control F function for paper reading is pretty. But that being said, so I guess 2 points that come out of this is now that I've also written papers, that's something I'm keeping in my mind when I'm thinking is as you're writing a paper, be realistic about how people are probably reading it and make it digestible and accessible in sort of that format as well. But I don't remember where else I was going to go with this, but yeah, I mean, I guess I read papers a lot more now to sort of get one particular piece of information, and then if I have time, I would really like to be able to sit down and read papers all the way through and do sort of a more broad scale synthesis. And actually, as you continue in academic or research career, the opportunity to write review papers is really, that's the only time I get to like do that anymore. And so it can seem like writing book reports again, but it's actually incredibly useful.
I also do not have as much time to spend with the literature as I might like. I think what we're looking to get from these papers often centers on kind of methodology, more so than specific kind of biological results and how that exists in the framework of the field. We also pay a lot of attention to, what some of our competitors are doing. So if there's a new sequencer that's being launched, a new update, to that sequencer, a new kit. So we pay a lot of attention to that as well. So that in a sense, that's kind of our version of the literature, whether that's, presentations that a company might give, a press release or, methods that they're, releasing, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I guess that's my answer to that question.
Thanks. I'll address the grad school. I think there's nothing more critical than being absolutely consumed with the literature. How are you going to do new science if you don't know what's there? And when in grad school and postdoc, it was the most important thing I did was to stay abreast and dig deep, find, to read. There was not a day that went by that I wasn't reading many papers. So it was fundamental. Now, as a professor, it changed because of time. There's a trade-off with time. And so and once you become so specialized in your field, there's a lot less to keep up with. Because you are aware of who's doing what, you know who to look for, you know the papers. Now we have citation alerts. It's a little bit easier, somewhat, because you understand the extent of your field, and so it's not like you're having to read that deeply all the time. But now I use my students, and so my classes, I always have them. This is a manipulation of you all, probably here. Why don't you come up with this annotated bibliography of this topic and write and then I get their papers and, oh, that's paper I should read. And so you teach them how to summarize it well, and they do really good jobs. And then, it's good for them, it's good for me. Gosh, there's nothing more important than that. And it's a shame that as we get more busy in our careers, we lose that connection. But in grad school, there's nothing more important I think you can do.
My current role, there are two buckets. There's one where there's a literature around the technology, approaches, methods, and that I sort of monitor based on my Twitter, the community I follow, and going to meetings, and I just quickly write down, like when people add a little reference, those papers that I collect regarding the technology and the approaches. And then there's the other bucket, many buckets actually, every time we have a collaboration with someone who's studying Alzheimer's or inflammatory bowel disease, I have to kind of become an expert very quickly. So that's usually a steep learning curve, but I have to go through a literature of what's been done with metabolomics in that space and like how we're going to interpret it. So yeah, and I don't have a ton of time, so sometimes, always, I don't read every single detail of the paper. There's certain sections that my eyes always go through. If the paper is super relevant, then I'll go through the whole thing. But usually it's just kind of quickly distilling information of what's known.
I have a question that's a little more off the current theme. When you were, applying for position, looking at what you would be interested in doing, but then also while you were doing interviews, how did you how did you know what's more important, whether you have a specific skill set already or whether you maybe don't have that skill set yet, but you're really excited to learn something new? Like what was more important in choosing if that job is right for you and for being competitive for the position?
Very honest response here. I had to get a job in the Boston area. I did my postdoc in Seattle, so I did not go through a thought process at all. My partner was moving, also an academic. I got a job in the Boston area, so triggered a two-body problem. You have to figure out who's going to give up some things to be in the same city. And I was lucky enough that my boss was very open to the idea of me not having a specific set of skills that I needed. So I was very excited to learn. I've always been, because that's kind of a universal feature of a scientist. We like learning new things. That's why we're doing what we do. But I think it not only depends on your desire to learn new things, it also depends on the person who needs you to work with them. Because some people may not have the time or the funds to wait for you to go through that process.
So are you asking sort of about, can you restate your question?
Whether it seemed to be more important to have
The fit versus skill set.
excited to learn something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky because I guess in the faculty line, there's sort of a trajectory that you just do. There's steps, pretty straightforward steps to get to that interview position. in terms of, yeah, I mean, you definitely want to be open to learning new things, of course, as a faculty member, but you also have to be really hyper-focused on getting your lab and your teaching set up. And so I'm not sure if I have a terribly good response for that. I mean, I also had this similar situation. I never envisioned myself at Colgate teaching school, toothpaste college. I never heard of this place. And so, I know, Cornell, you would love that. Big rivals. I'm from Alabama. Liberal arts schools weren't a thing there, really. And so, but my wife and I applied. The job ads were plant ecologist. Well, we both are plant ecologists. And so we both landed positions at Colgate, for the same job, actually. And so I guess we're at Colgate. And it was it's an incredible decision that we've made. And so, but you do want to have a good fit. I mean, I have my former students that are applying and in faculty positions now, and some of them have wound up in places that aren't great fits for them for whatever reason. And so, sometimes the job market is very competitive and you want to jump at the first thing. And maybe that's the right thing if you would need to feed your kids. But, it can be tricky if it's not the right fit. And so there's a fit question and there's the sort of open to new skills, I guess. And so I'm not sure if I've answered that well, but.
So I think for me, you go into that job interview process, right, like only with the skills that you have. And, I think if you're honest with yourself about like, is this something that, right, if there's a skill that maybe you're lacking that, over the course of the interview, it's clear that, it's something that the hiring manager probably wants the new team member to have. Right, if you're legitimately excited about learning that, right, I think the only thing you can do is to communicate that. If it's something you don't want to do, and it's integral to the job, then that probably tells you that maybe it's not, the right fit. And then I think over the course of interviews, you can get some useful information about, is there a skill that keeps coming up for these kinds of jobs that it seems like is really critical to have that you don't have? And then that's something that I think, you can kind of go back and see, well, how can I develop that skill so that I'm more competitive, with, future applications you might make?
I think during the interview, that's a great time for you to ask them questions as well and get a sense of where are you coming into this project or this team or this, I guess like project on? Like, are you coming partway in through a project and you need to hit the ground running to be able to pick up slack, or if someone left and they need all these samples they need to get processed, then you already need to have that particular lab skill set to get that done. Or is it, so it's really going to depend on getting a feel for what the project is, or what the task, what the job actually is, and what are you going to be able to need to do immediately to be able to be productive.
I think for a lot of non-research entry-level positions, that enthusiasm is more important than the skill set in a lot of cases. Both the enthusiasm and maybe some of the personality traits, like for example, that attention to detail is something that if you have it, you have it. If you don't have it, I can't teach it to you. I can teach you what our style is. I can teach you what the difference between an N dash and an M dash and a hyphen is. But I can't teach you to notice that. You're either going to notice it or you don't. So you need to have the enthusiasm, and you need to have sort of the general personality traits that fit the position.
I was wondering how each of you discovered the job that you're currently working in, or just how you discovered your interests in that field.
I did a lot of informational interviews the last year of grad school, and a lot of going to talks on campus by people who were in different professions. And that was really, really helpful for me. I found this specific job by just looking on, I think it was Indeed at the time. So that brute force approach can work, but the informational interviews and just hearing from people who were in different roles was really helpful.
I spent a couple years on the academic job market, and during that soul-crushing process, I started thinking about other options. It's great. You guys will love it. And I hadn't really ever thought of a government or federal research job before. I actually did have some family members who had been involved in it as contractors, but in physics, so like totally different field. And yeah, so what it was is during grad school, I was a student board member, or a student member of the board for the Botanical Society of America. And one of the things I was responsible for that was creating resources, career resources for other fellow students in the botanical sciences to do their own career explorations. And as part of that, I came across USA Jobs, which is where .com, which is where the federal government posts all federal jobs. And yeah, I just started using that search tool and looked for a plant biologist, and that's how I found out about the surprising array of plant science and just science positions in general that the federal government has. And actually the one that I have now is a rather unique one because I'm not only a research scientist, but I'm also a service scientist. So my primary mission is not I have a mission to do research, but my primary mission is curation and taking care of this germplasm collection. And I had no idea this job existed before I just started looking online at this federal job website and saw it posted.
So toward the end of my PhD, I was doing some methods development work, specifically with some kind of NGS-related workflows, and I found that that was something that really, really excited me, so much so that I could envision like making that my job. And so as I was starting to look at, look for job postings, right, I had used New England Biolab's reagents as a graduate student. I thought it was a great company. The reagents worked well. And I saw the posting, I think it was on the NEB website. So it was kind of that traditional way of like, I see a job and I apply for it. And it really was to a T kind of what I, was looking for, and went through a very, very long interview process. I think anyone that was in the lab with me when I was doing that was saying, oh, Dan's in his little office doing another interview for 2 hours. Yeah, so that, I think it was kind of the traditional route of just seeing it and applying for it and eventually getting it.
Job boards were important. Botanical Society of America, BSA, ASPB, ASPT, all the acronyms, ESA, they all maintain job boards, and I found a lot of ads that way. And there's also, I'm racking my brain, I can't remember, there's also a wiki page out there that floats around. Some of you may have seen this, or folks post all the new jobs and people are responding like, I got the interview, not with your name, I know it's closed, I think it's an internal candidate. There's all this sort of, that page floats around every year. It's a Google Sheet wiki, you know this thing, you probably, that was fundamental. And some people would go in and say, oh, this position is closed, and it's not really closed, but so that was how I sort of found the position. And, I was applying in 2008, bad things happened in 2008, and so I applied for 27 different positions, and, had interviews here and there, and some of the jobs, I interviewed at one place, and they said, oh, we're not hiring anymore, sorry. So, you have to have a backup plan. That's what's so great that it's, there's this diverse panel here. It shows you the possibilities that are out there, because the faculty jobs are, obviously, everything's competitive, but there's many more ways to skin a cat, I guess. But you have to be patient in this process. As you said, it can be soul crushing. Yeah, that was brutal. Yeah, so.
My path was a bit different. I trained as a biochemist, plant biochemist. I did like plant pathogen interactions in grad school with someone who trained with Greg Martin here, actually. So I was working with tomatoes, and then I did developmental biology with Arabidopsis, and then I had to move to the Boston area. And I don't know if you guys know, there's not a ton of plant science in the Boston area. There's a lot of biomedical stuff, but at the time there was like one company called Indigo. I don't know if they're still around. No jobs at all. And then I had this colleague from grad school, this guy who was doing a postdoc in the lab that I'm currently in now, and he knew that I had to move to Boston, and he reached out to me and said, my boss is looking for a scientist. I said, I don't know metabolomics. So I immediately kind of like backed up. I was like, no, that will not work for me. Like, I don't know anything about that. And he kept insisting, and I had a call with the person, they hired me, and he really liked me, which was the call. In that case, I think what really helped me is the network of people that you know. And he knew me. I had not worked with this guy in Texas, this graduate student who was a postdoc, but I was the president of the Biochemistry Graduate Student Association when I was in Texas. So he knew me through that, and he knew that I could, I guess, lead a meeting and in a civilized manner, which apparently was not common. So he knew that I somehow was good at talking to people, and a lot of people knew me. People knew what I was doing, and that was sort of the connection that was drawn. So sometimes the people, and this is one of the reasons why when you meet someone here, your peers, it's just very important to just get to know them well and be a good person, be a good citizen of the community, because you never know when these people are going to be your peers, they're going to be your boss, they're going to be your employees. So, always be good.
I think we have time for one more question. Isn't Byron down here?
For your first job out of graduate school, can you tell us a little bit about negotiations, like negotiating salary, compensation, vacation, whatever, like how you did it? Should you have done more, less, etc.?
I'm a terrible person to answer this because I did not negotiate. I was like, how much you want? Like, well, this much. They're like, no, I was like 20 grand below like what you should be asking. So I did not go through that process very well.
I think that's critical, and maybe Sylvia, that's something for the have you have Cornell the Business School come in and give the students lessons in that, because there's one point in your career where you have that power, and that's when they have that offer, and you will never have that power again to negotiate. And you really have to, because and if you're at the right place, they want to provide you with what you need to be successful. And you have to have a realistic, like, can I survive in Ithaca on $20,000 a year? Probably not. I have 4 kids, so you have to have an understanding of what you need and ask for it and push back for that and be willing to walk away if you have the option to walk away, because you'll never have that opportunity again. There's all kind of ways to negotiate for, whether it be salary, which is important when you're young, because the more you make when you're young, the more you make when you're older, because investments. But arguing for better startup or realistic things that you need. I mean, that's the moment to do it, and we are really lousy at doing that. You feel embarrassed and you feel like, how can I'm not that good. You got to get over that, because you really have to. This is your entire career or your rest of your life, and so you might upset a dean, or they're not going to be upset. They deal with people all the time, and so it's really critical to have that skill set. And I don't know how you develop the courage to do that, but you really have to learn that. And I'm sure some folks in the business school can have lectures on this stuff and can teach you how to do this, but it's really important, and you have to not take $20,000 less than you.
I will say, if I may add, from now the other side of the aisle, like the hiring perspective, because I hire people, we give people a fair range. Living costs are super important, right? So you want to keep that in mind, whatever you're going. It's like, oh, this looks like a lot of money on paper. It may not be good enough for where you are. But when we negotiate with people we hire, the one thing I would say is you can push it, but be careful how much you push it. Because when we hire someone with this higher salary range, our expectations change a little bit. And the expectation is, okay, you're going to bring to the table something that we're going to be hands off, you're an expert on this. And when that doesn't come to fruition, then it generates some issues. So it's good to be assertive and not get shortchanged, but also know what you're bringing to the table.
So in terms of negotiation, there were, in that meeting, there were a few things that I had asked for and gotten. The way that NEB's compensation is kind of structured, it kind of rewards tenure in a sense. So there's, anyway, other factors that go into that, but so that was not something that was really kind of able to be negotiated, right? I've been there for, now, 3 years, and I, enjoy my role and see myself, growing in the company. So that kind of all worked out. But I think, again, there were a few things that I had wanted that I had to just ask for and gotten. I think they were not huge asks, but made me feel like I at least negotiated a little bit.
So my first job out of grad school was a postdoctoral research position. And I'm not gonna lie, coming out of grad school, any sort of salary increase seemed really great. So I did not negotiate for that job at all. But I got really fortunate because I actually was at a institute, the Whitehead Institute, Broad Connection over there. Hey. Or the buildings are right next door to each other. And the Whitehead is great because they actually treat their postdocs like real employees. And so, so I mean, in terms of like not just like healthcare benefit access, but also like retirement benefits, which is not necessarily a given for postdoc positions. So fortunately, I didn't really need to negotiate there that much. For this federal position, the federal government, they are transparent about pay grades. You can look up all of that online. There's a pay table for the different GS or sort of job level positions and what those different levels get paid. In terms of negotiating, they are also fairly transparent about the limits of how far you can and what they'll consider for doing job negotiations. So there are some hard limits, like they will not do certain sort of salary increases or like signing bonuses over a certain amount. So that was a really useful guide in that sense. And also I got fortunate just because during my interviews, some people who are now my colleagues took some time to point out what at the particular site that I'm at, what sort of negotiations would be considered and sort of how to approach that. So that's something else, like during your interview, if you have a chance, if you're fortunate enough to do an in-person interview and you get some one-on-one sort of more informal time, that's just like a good time to sort of put out some feelers in that direction there. Because yeah, I will tell you, the HR people are not going to provide you any guidance on that. They don't want you to know you can negotiate, so.
Yeah, I also did not negotiate when I got my first job out of grad school, and I should have, and I would say that you should. On being on the other side of the table now, there has never been a situation where the initial offer that we made for somebody was the highest that we could go. We couldn't go a lot higher in most situations, but we could have gone a little bit, and some people asked for that little bit and some people did not. So and that point about that being the time to determine your salary is true in industry too, because generally in industry, yes, you're probably getting a little bit of a raise each year, and yes, there's a possibility of promotions and maybe negotiating a larger raise some years, but it's hard, and that place where you're starting from is determining how hard it's going to be to move up to higher levels from there. So it's really important, and I would say, maybe this is just from my personal experience at Bio-Rad, but to be honest with the recruiter when you're talking to them about the salary that you're looking for. We had some people who gave really high salaries, and when they were talking with the recruiter, and that was the end of the discussion, because that was a salary that we couldn't give them, and so there was no point in talking further. So you want to be realistic, but also be honest. I guess I would say it's hard. It's really hard.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
There's a great book. It's called Landing a Job in Academic Biology, if you're going that route. It's actually a little tiny paperback book, and it's really good, and it has some insights. I don't know if you've seen this before, but I used to give it to all of our students when they were graduating, going into grad school, because, I mean, it's like, what questions do you ask the dean? What questions do you ask the provost? What questions do you ask the chair? How you even know what a provost is? So those things are in that book, and there's some stuff in there about negotiations, and it's not rocket science, but it was really helpful for me when I was applying, and I give it to all of my students when they're on the market because it's some sound common sense advice. And I get 10% of every sale.
I think we're going to wrap it up here, but if there are any more questions, please feel free to find them at lunch.